So if you were only comparing your year-on-year performance and you'd be like, I'm comfortable with the 10% extra that I'm year-on-year. But the reality was you could be 30, 40% year-on-year. And the reverse is when we're in slight slowdown markets, you might beat yourself to feeling like, hey, last year I did so much and this year I am down. But it might be that the market, like you're down 10%, but the market is down 20%. You're doing relatively better than the market. So I generally like the answer of doing both. You want to do year on year because you want to know how your portfolio is doing, but you also want to know the answer of what's happening in terms of regional level, right? Whether that's hyper local to your market or a peer set of competitors that you're comparing against, right? But you want to know both. One is not a sufficient answer ever.
So we did this study and basically would see that uh, only 12% of the listings really have this money making content in their listings, the title, descriptions, in the reviews, in the photos, in the list of amenities. That's the big things we analyzed.
Welcome to RevLabs by PriceLabs.
Well, hello everyone. Hello and welcome to this last RevLabs Rentals Scale Up RSU webinar of the year. We'll be talking about not just the year, we'll be talking about 2026 big trends. So as usual, it's you stream in and it's one past the due time. I will get started quickly. As you know, today we have a great guest, right, for all these RevLabs, because at the end of the year, we have Richie, who's there, who's one of the co-founders of PriceLabs. So pretty exciting, exclusive data, fresh data we pulled for you, Richie's views on the market. And also, as usual, this will be interactive. So we'll have polls so you get your view on the market because it's all about serving you, right? In the end, what matters is how you feel about this and whether you you also see this in your markets. Last thing of housekeeping, obviously, this is being recorded. This is being recorded. You get the recording after once we're done. So probably I would say next Monday, I'm guessing, with also main takeaways. So this has been recorded, but do stay until the end because you can ask your questions. All right, it's one past the allotted time, so let me get started with the slides. Feel free in the chat to tell us where you are. That's always interesting to have a feel of this. If you have questions, we have a Q&A section. You probably see the Q&A, I'm guessing. So ask your question there if you have questions. We have questions till the end. All right. On this, I'm going to start showing slides because we have a lot of data, a lot of graphs. Let's get started without further ado. It will not be a presentation if I'm not struggling with the slides. Let me know. Anybody, can you see my slides? Yes? Thumbs up. Okay, cool. All right. Again, welcome to the show. Again, let us know. Be curious to know, for example, how many listings you have. That's also good to have to make sure, again, we customize this. So really here, we're going to be focusing mainly on large property managers, people who have 100 plus listings in North America, in US, but I'm sure that the learnings will be interesting for everyone. All right. We are PriceLabs. So PriceLabs, I'm guessing few of you are customers of ours, and thank you for that. If in the trial, thank you as well. So we are revenue management during pricing platform. We serve not only short-term rentals, but also all kind of hospitality businesses. Something I want quickly to mention because mostly you know us, but something that's new. We've just passed the mark of 600,000 listings that we price every day. So why is it important? Because it means that we very thankful at this end of the year. And number two, as we talked about as usual, it's a big responsibility. So we are always looking forward to provide you the best and most improved products. And of course, we do have data around the world, which in teams as well around the world to help serve you. That was my plug for this. All right. RSU is a news website that belongs to PriceLabs, and there's a free newsletter. Subscribe to it with big trends. So if you like big trends about the market, what's happening, what's Airbnb is up to, Booking.com up to, market data, what they mean, just subscribe to it. All right, that's us. You probably know us. That was just the plugs for our two. Without further ado, I'm very happy to welcome Richie. Hello, Richie. How are you?
Hey Thibault, doing great. We're almost at the end of year, and of course, like you mentioned, it's fantastic to hit that 600,000 listing milestone. And yeah, I think this is the first RevLabs that I'm attending, particularly this year. So I'm glad that I can make the last RevLabs of the year, and I see we have strong participation, and so looking forward to the chat today.
Exactly. Well, thank you for being here. You kind of a Christmas gift to the audience, and you have, black and red are, of course, the
Yeah, Christmas red right here.
Santa Claus, almost. But I have the one with a white beard. All right. So again, we'll be your host today. We'll be sharing a lot of data, and thank you for the team. I mentioned Shweta, Stigda, Yuvika, and revenue management team at PriceLabs who put together this data just for you. What I'll be covering. I'm rushing through this to really get through the data in case you're wondering why I'm going so fast this time. First, we'll talk about a lot about demand, how demand is shifting. We'll also be talking about how people who manage 100 plus listings, so what we call large property managers in a way, why they're different, how we see this in data, how we see they're different. There is a part that Richie will be covering using all this experience. It is, of course, weekly conversation he has with such property managers. I'm sure many of you here are this. And then we'll talk about something very important, which is quality, right? We know Airbnb, for example, is talking about quality all the time. We'll see the impact of quality of your listings on revenue. We have direct data for this. It's going to be pretty interesting. And then we'll finish by talking about what teams can do, your teams can do for 2026 to win. All right. All right, the first one is going to be around demand shifting. I think the first thing we hear, and going to have a poll around this. We hear a lot, for example, that the booking window has shifted, right? We hear a lot that people are maybe booking later. Before we show you the data, I'm curious, what are you seeing in your market? What are you seeing in your market? So the question is, compared to 3 years ago, how do your booking windows feel today? Later, not later. Just 1 minute vote, and we go straight to results, and then we show what we are finding out. All right, has it been a minute? I think we can get the results now. All right, so 41% of you said guests are booking much later, 38% a bit later. So the later clearly is there, right? Because it's like more than 2/3 of you, and only 5% saying booking much earlier. So let's go through from what you see in your market to what we see in, overall data. Indeed, what we're seeing here, first, let me start with the US. Here we're showing the booking window since 2022. So different colors, you have 2022, 23, 24, 25. And here we're looking at 2 months. We picked 2 months to make it clear. For example, the month of January. In January, basically, on average, so it's really an average, right, over the US, urban plus vacation rental markets. So that's an average. The average was 19 days in 2022. It's down to 15 days on average for January. For July, so obviously we have more, traveling, families traveling, people book way more in advance. So it's an actual traveling season in the US. It went down from 34 to 29 days. So that's just an average, but you can see it is really going down. And if I go one more thing, what's interesting as well, we look down, averages are interesting, but let's go deeper, right? So here we looked at the share of last minute bookings, if you will. So the idea is here what we mean by last minute in this case is booking window of a week, 0 to 7 days, right? And a share of these bookings among all the bookings you're getting, the share of those has also crept up, right? From 21% in 2021 to 27%, right? And at the same time, bookings made more than 60 days in advance. So they decreased from 26% to 22%. What's interesting, a jump from 21% to 27%, that's 6 points or plus 28%. So it's a big difference, right? And maybe Richie, if you want to add some color to this, but that's changing everything, sort of like how I think about when demand is going to show up last minute, the share of last minute, how I'm holding my prices, how flexible I'm making my last minute settings, for example. This is what you've seen as well from our customers, them having to flex on last minute as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Thibault, like you said, this data is an aggregate and every market can be different, right? Your hyper-local market can be different. Um, but having said that, what this highlights is that there's this shift in consumer pattern where, on average at least, people are booking last minute. Maybe there's uncertainty in markets, maybe there's uncertainty in where they can travel to or whether they can travel to or not, right? And so people are booking last minute. But what that means for us as property managers and revenue managers is to not panic, right? Because sometimes when you're used to seeing, oh, I used to get all of these bookings 60 days before, and now I've not gotten those bookings, right? And we maybe in a state of panic, we may uh, start changing how we do our business too soon, whether that's dropping rates or changing some other things, changing things operationally, etc. Right? It's important to look at the data at your local market level to saying how are the booking windows shifting. But at an aggregate, we can say that we're seeing this shortening of booking window. Um, important to keep track of your market and know such that you're not reacting either too soon or too late, right? But in this case, generally, if booking windows are becoming shorter, people end up reacting too soon and adjusting their parameters, whether that's operational controls of stay restrictions or price restrictions, etc. They start reacting too soon, and so I'd caution against that.
Exactly, and indeed, something to add here. So it does, as you said, right? It means that in some market, definition of last minute basically has changed in a way, right? So it means that maybe settings you had 2 years ago and just carrying over prepared 2026, you can see that carrying things over for your overall last minute settings will not do because things are shifting. But obviously, what you want as well is to look at your market data, especially if you're using PriceLabs, where you can see basically a bit how it's going to shape up for you, right? So adapt to your case, to your market. Luckily, this can show you, if not exactly what's happening in your market, you can see that things are changing, and you want to make sure you're adapting your rules. And again, you're looking at data. Obviously, we are here to help you, and you have great tools to see this on listing level, obviously on portfolio level, as you're a large company. Portfolio analytics, for example, is a great place for you to see these kind of things. And we have also a report builder, fantastic reports there to see. Have an overview of your market, how things are, your portfolio, how things are shaping up. All right. Another thing we had here, exactly what we talked about is, oops, sorry about that. It's more the thing around we talk about the US. We also see this in UK. So UK is a market where it's also pretty dramatic. To be clear, we look at also France, Spain, and Italy. It's not as dramatic. So we see a shift. I think it's kind of especially for France, for example, with the Olympics, it's kind of hard to see clear patterns at some point because there's been a lot of noise in there. But it's really marked in the UK as well. So it's just here, the word is just not the UK. As we just said, really look at your own data. What's happening in your market is what counts, because obviously what's happening in London is not what's happening in Manchester. It's not what's happening in the Cotswold. Another thing I think was being very striking, and we talked about this, is that the large events. Oh, I'm sorry, I was supposed to ask you a question. Sorry about that. But there's a poll apparently coming up. No, there's no poll. All right. No, I was right. There's no poll. All right. Another thing we've seen a lot, especially if you've been listening to what Airbnb is talking about. Airbnb has been talking a lot about the weight of events. Airbnb is sponsoring the Olympics, the lot of events. So Booking.com, I think, is sponsoring the FIFA for football. So what's happening here? We can see several things. We can see that, of course, events are important, and events are key in a sense that a company like Airbnb will want to have small hosts start listing their place only for a few weeks and come to the market to add more supply. Of course, we know as well that if you look at the Olympics in France, for example, then you have people just who think they're going to make millions, who price way too high, and then have to crash their prices, where we see usually behavior we saw in France from property managers. Well, hopefully looking at the right data with PriceLabs, they didn't start so high, so they actually got the bookings, and they did not have this crazy need to crash the prices in the end. So again, that's interesting because there's more and more marketing around events, people going to events. We see this a lot on TikTok, a lot of things. At the same time, this flex in supply is happening as well. So again, looking at data is more important, is really, really important. So here, some cases, so we took the data 100 days out from the Milan Olympics. So the Winter Olympics, you may or may not know, are in Italy, in Milan. Here you can see obviously the market of Milan compared with last year. So basically early 2025. Now occupancy has jumped from 3% to 21%. Super Bowl is coming up in the US. Occupancy and occupancy, I think it's in Santa Clara. Somebody check with that. I think it's Santa Clara, but I'm not. I have a doubt whether it's Santa Clara or not. If not, let me know. Again, obviously for that market, occupancy has really jumped from 2 to 15%. That's 7 times more. You can see how it's jumping. FIFA is interesting because we pulled the data before this week's, I think it was this week, announcement of which country was booking where. So we know that already this will have jumped. So again, that's very important for you as well, is that if you have not looked at this, you may know that basically the World Cup will be mostly in the US, but also a bit in Mexico and a bit in Canada. That's why you have Mexico here. And I think that's the opening game. It will be happening in Mexico City, if I'm not mistaken. That's why we are here. You will see things like, obviously, the big event is coming, but also what's really important, if you're in this market, you have to know which team will be playing, because that's going to have a lot of impact on you, right? If it's the US team playing in the US, you can bet this. So you also have to follow the qualifiers, the qualifying things. That's the thing. Any color, Richie, to add on the weight of events that we see overall?
No, I mean, I think this is a good strategy to think about as you think about your 2026, right? You want to look at the key events that exist in your market and that drive revenue. Again, because it's a Price Labs webinar, in Price Labs, on your neighborhood data or on events tab, you can find the events that we at least know about in your market. um, and you want to make sure you win in terms of revenue for those dates, right? Because when you start spreading your annual revenues, you'd start to notice that a good chunk of it, or meaningful chunk of it, where you can really drive the delta, comes on events, and you want to get the event pricing particularly right and locked in. And so that's kind of what I would say, which is why these events really matter. And then you start with making sure your event prices are really locked in and good, and you feel comfortable. Then I would say if you're a weekend market, you want to make sure your weekend prices are locked in, your high season prices are locked in, and then you look at broader picture, right? And Thibault, you're absolutely right, right? Like I think generally the other consumer trend that we have seen over the last 2 3 years shape up is that people are really willing to pay for experiences around the world. And this is not specific to US or UK or some market. It's around the world. People are paying up for experiences. And so when you have events like Olympics, Super Bowl, FIFA, people are just like really into it, right? And so you'd be surprised what kind of ADR multiples, so the rates that you book at, that you can drive in some of these events, right? Having said that, we've also seen the Paris Olympics problem where we had almost too much of oversupply, and then we had something similar happen with Super Bowl, I want to say last year or the year before, right? Where there was just excess supply, right? So you want to balance it well, but generally, I would say if your city's not had a similar event, and if your property has not experienced a similar event, you'd be surprised by how much multiple you can drive on the ADR, right? So you want to make sure you if your city has a major event, or if your neighborhood has a major event, you want to look at those prices, lock them down. I would personally hold some of those prices if it's a major event, right? But also not for too long. I'd monitor how the occupancy in the market is shaping up. Um, but yeah, there was one question around it said occupancy STLY. The STLY is same time last year. And so what we're trying to look at is, let's say, I don't know when Milan Olympics is. Let's say it is, because it says 100 days out. So I assume it's in March some point. So we're today in December 2025, looking at March 2026. And same thing if we had looked at last year for Milan in December 2024 for March 2025, we would see very low occupancy in the market. But now we are seeing a lot higher occupancy.
Yeah. And it's in February. I checked for you, Richie. I checked for you.
Okay.
And thank you, Jennifer, in the chat. It's Santa Clara indeed at the Levi Stadium. So thank you for having our back for Super Bowl. A quick thing is, obviously I'll pull this as well. So Richie was just talking about the prices, obviously the events. So here, that's the ADR we're seeing. That's the ADR which we see things being booked, to be clear, right? It's not which people are listing. So that's also give you an idea. So again, that's really, really important. Look at the data at PriceLabs. We give you the data we see, the prices which are being booked. So here, for example, it's not like people are being, these were really at which level is selling. Obviously, things are going to be changing. Again, that's why, again, Mexico City is very important. We're going to update the data a bit later, early next week actually for us, but you can see how important it is. All right. I think that's my cue to go to the next section. And we'll be talking indeed about how large property managers are different, you are from the rest of the market and why it's important. And I think that's the leading with the first poll of this, just so we understand a bit better. When you compare yourself as a big company, what do you compare yourself against? That's what this poll is. And that's going to help us being the result with the queue for Richie to get started in this section. So let us know how you comparing yourself as a large company.
Cool. I think we have about 50% of you participated. You probably see a pop-up that says benchmarking something. When you review your performance, what do you mostly benchmark against? Would be great if you could give that answer, helpful to understand. But as you're typing in that answer, I think particularly for large property managers, 2025, especially in US market, but some other markets as well, was an interesting year. We saw a lot of institutional money and some bit of aggregation come into the market, right? And so this segment is particularly becoming an interesting segment. It has been always, but over the last few years, we've seen tremendous push behind the large property manager segment, and 2025 was uh, almost a moment of reckoning, where we saw a lot of institutional money coming in, a lot of PMs getting together and building like a conglomerate of sorts. And so it'll be an interesting year. This is something that we saw in US, and I'd imagine we'd expect to see some of that in rest of the markets as well. And then secondly, we also saw some businesses that did not work out in 2025. Some really, really large businesses that ultimately had to had to sell down and go back to very localized operations, even if they had large businesses work locally. But with that, if we go into the market data here quickly,
Yeah, I will
Rafi,
just giving you. I don't know if
yeah,
maybe you don't see the answer to the poll, right? So
I
okay,
do
I can.
see.
I will do it. So, 50%, 52% of you say you compare yourself to your own year-on-year performance. 25% city regional level. 17% comp set basically peers, and then 6% we don't read benchmark, we look at KPIs, and 0% national market data. Which you talked about, Richie. Like, look, national is interesting, but local beats national anytime for this. So, moving on.
Yeah. Now that you've drawn my attention to this, but I'll first finish this and I'll come back to the benchmarking side again. But yeah, so let's say specifically for US and generally true for a lot of markets where vacation rentals have had a long history of operations, right? So that's US, UK, a bunch of Western European countries, Australia as well, I believe. We've seen generally the overall supply has remained flat or single digit growths. Traditionally, Airbnb or vacation rentals in general were growing really fast, but now in the last year or two, the supply has flattened. Now that may be due to the uncertainty in the market, also the interest rate environment that we're seeing, etc. Right? But we're seeing a little bit flattening supply. But what's interesting is that professionally managed properties. So in the market, you can imagine you have the owner host segment, you have the co-host segment, which is somewhere in between the owner host and professionally managed. And then we have professionally managed. Generally, we think of it as you have more than 20, 25 properties. And what we have seen in the market is while the market generally has remained flat, the number of properties that professionally managed operators manage has grown, right? So markets becoming a little bit more professionalized, and that's interesting. But before we jump to the next slide, I quickly also want to address the benchmarking thing. One thing that I really like about everyone that's on the call, you're not benchmarking against national market data, right? So we don't have to address something that we should not need to. What I do not completely like is that a large part of you are benchmarking against your own year-on-year performance. Now, the reason why I say that I do not like this, it's a great thing. You should benchmark against your own year-on-year performance. But what it misses out is what's happening in the broader market. So, as an example, let's say you were we're none of us want to be transported back into the COVID year, but let me take you back into the COVID year of 2020 or 2021, right? You're back there and you're comparing your performance against what you did in 2019 or 2020, and you're now sitting in 2021. You would be missing out on a lot of revenue because we saw a tremendous demand in vacation rentals when it was 2021, 2022, right? And so if you were only comparing your year-on-year performance and you'd be like, I'm comfortable with the 10% extra that I'm year-on-year. But the reality was you could be 30, 40% year-on-year. And the reverse is when we're in slight slowdown markets, you might beat yourself to feeling like, hey, last year I did so much and this year I am down. But it might be that the market, like you're down 10%, but the market is down 20%. You're doing relatively better than the market. So I generally like the answer of doing both. You want to do year on year because you want to know how your portfolio is doing, but you also want to know the answer of what's happening in terms of regional level, right? Whether that's hyper local to your market or a peer set of competitors that you're comparing against, right? But you want to know both. One is not a sufficient answer ever. Um, I hope that's helpful. Going back to the large PMs. So large PMs, lots happening in US, particularly institutional money coming in around the world. We expect like that trend will pick up. Usually takes a couple of quarters or years. But we also saw some large businesses not do as well. Having said that, at an aggregate level, we are seeing that professionally managed segment gain more and more inventory. What is interesting though is as you look at, and Thibault, if you can jump to next slide, what is interesting is as you look at this segment, you it's counterintuitive, but particularly the large 100 plus listing segment, they tend to run lower occupancies than market, right? Very counterintuitive. You'd expect that they should be running a lot more occupancies, but I think sometimes they end up being savvier to saying, I don't need to just go for occupancy. I need to go for the right RevPAR, right type of occupancy, and drive revenue rather than just blindly drive occupancy. Thibault, I see you've come off the mic here. Thoughts?
Yes, indeed. I'm with you here. It's also this. It's savvier again. Will and that's the conclusion probably will drive here. But it also comes down sometimes to owners. Obviously, if I'm the owner of my own place and I'm directly on Airbnb, maybe I'm more willing to go for occupancy because I care more. Maybe I panic more, or maybe I'm more willing to compromise. I can make my own decision fast. Obviously, if I'm contracting an owner, I'm a very large company, sometimes it can be very hard to get them to be a bit more flexible with a lot of policies, cancellation, price, minimum stays. And or if we need them to be, it's a lot of work. So, sometimes also you end up, maybe also like beautiful properties, but whose flexibility in cancellation policies and pricing is just not as much. But in the end, that can result in lower occupancy. But I guess we're going to see it's not always, it's sometimes it's a choice, sometimes it's not a choice, but we can see that property managers are pretty smart about dealing with this.
But yeah, like interesting choice to see, like that relative to the market. Sometimes property managers may end up with lower occupancy. But if we flip to the next slide here, um, even though property managers are gaining market share, they're adding more properties, they run lower occupancies. Having said that, they do drive better RevPAR. Now, RevPAR is a mix of your ADR multiplied by occupancy, so it's almost revenue, right? And what we see here is except for France, and I'm not sure what's happening there, but in almost all other markets, the large property managers are driving better RevPAR than the average of the market. There are a bunch of things mixed in here. We also see generally the large property managers manage more luxury type of properties versus sometimes the owners or co-hosts may have not as much luxury properties, right? So that could be a mix in it. But having said that, I think we also see that large property managers tend to be savvier about their rates, protecting their stay restrictions, and thus they can sometimes balance with slightly lower occupancy, still a higher ADR. Now, that's not to say that's what you should do, right? You should figure out what works for you. You may want to push for more occupancy, and quite frankly, if you could push for 100% occupancy, you should push for 100% occupancy, right? But you should pick your windows when you're going to get high ADR bookings. And then as you come last minute, maybe you do want to drop your prices, right? But yeah, altogether, very interesting patterns here from large property managers. Excited to see some things in chat. Hoping to hear what the large property managers are seeing that are on the call. But over to you, Thibault.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Richie. And again, indeed, right? If you agree, do not agree, let us know in the chat. We're very, very curious to read this. All right, sorry about this. It's the end of the year. Of course, I got a cold on the wrong day for the last webinar. Bear with me. I have my faithful hot tea. So let's talk about quality here. For two big reasons, basically. We know that Airbnb, I think a couple of weeks back, well, a month ago now at least, Airbnb had this big event in San Francisco, and maybe some of you in the US attended this big event, where basically they really, really insisted on the importance of quality. So I'm curious about how you're seeing this. First, let's talk about the quality of your listings. For example, on Airbnb, Verbal, Booking.com. This is a quick poll here asking you basically how often basically you do this. Maybe somebody in your team, could be a distribution team, for example, depending on who does it on this. But we're just curious to see how often you you tweak them basically, or you make sure to optimize them. But where I'm going here with Airbnb is there, for example, they really insisted to explain that the ranking on Airbnb in search results depend on two things. One, the probability that somebody will book the listing presented. So is it relevant? Multiplied by, or and factor as well of the probability that this person will leave a 5-star review. Because we know that's what Airbnb cares about, right? So it means that the search results are influenced as well by the probability of having a 5-star review. So it talks, of course, it talks about the matching between a user and a search result. It also talks about the quality perceived by the guest in the end, right? So that's really important. So and you'll see that at PriceLabs, we looked into this year. We'll be looking at fantastic data. I'm curious to have. But before I look at this, I start talking about this market data. I just want to share about the poll, right? So what do you do? How often you do this? Okay, so about once a month or more, you look into your OTA listings to optimize them. 58% of you, that's great. 23% of you every few months. 13% of you maybe once a year. 2% only when something's wrong, bad review and the complaints. It's only 2%, but it's also good to be reactive. 4% would like to, but we're not sure what to change. Okay, so for all of you who have to do it often or who don't have the time to do it, for all of you actually, I may have something for you coming up to help you out. Whether you need to do this very often or you don't just have the time to do it. But first, let's talk about why do we care? Why is it important? Something we talked about with Richie already is that obviously, if you're a large property manager, your patterns are a bit different. We talk about, maybe you have a large portfolio, so it's kind of hard, right? Because maybe you want to do things, and an owner just refuses to do the maintenance. Should be happening at the property, and it shows in the reviews, it shows in the photos, it just shows, right? So scaling quality, we see this in our data. So we isolated everybody on Airbnb, for example, against property managers more than 100 listings. What's interesting is that Airbnb has now not only Superhost, but also guest favorite. As you know, it's a label that is attributed not on a host level, but on a listing level. Right, guest favorite looks like, and if you search in Airbnb, you can see that guest favorite properties are showing up really fast, on the top of the search results. So you may think, if my properties are guest favorite, we're good. We're good. We should get that label, this extra booking, this extra higher placement. But I'm sorry to report, in some cases, it's not good enough. Why it's not good enough? Because if you look at the US, 30% of listings have that guest favorite label. So if you have it, it's not, you're not it's like a third of, the market has it too, right? It's not that different. It's like the minimal you should be getting. Good thing about this. And what we see though, again in the US, only 10% of the listings of large property managers have this, because again, it's like explain. We know it's harder to get a higher review score. We know there's correlation, right, as well. That you have a lower review score if you're bigger, for all kind of reasons, right? Could be because it's just harder to find cleaning companies across the country, across the market, provide you with consistency, right? That can be difficult. It could also be that people, they know your company. I think, Richie, you talked about this once, right? People see you as a company. They would be harsher that if it's Joe or Paul or Mary.
Right? It's so true. Like if your companies, like hosts get better ratings than companies, because like you can be more direct and less, because you're not giving a human a rating, almost, right? So I've heard that from OTAs as well, and yeah.
So the fact that Airbnb talks so much about quality, especially to large companies, can be like, I'm not going to say insulting, because that's not the point I'm going to make. Maybe like, hey, I'm a pro. I know what I'm doing. I know, and we know that, right? But we also know how hard it is to scale this, and how hard it is, right? And it's what I meant. What we only meant to say here is that if I look at the badges, especially in the US, guest favorite, like a lot of people has this. So I'm not going to say it's a new minimum, but that's why Airbnb has introduced layers, right? There's levels in guest favorite. There's the top 10%, top 5%, top 1%. So in a way, these are sort of the labels to strive for, and it's kind of hard. If I go like, why should I care? Why should we care, right? Because PriceLabs, we're all about revenue. So kind of looked at the impact of we look at basically properties with high scores, high review scores here. What kind of ADR do they command, right? Are they able to fetch higher prices? It's cause consequence, right? You could also argue that if you have a good property, that's you can command more prices, higher prices. That's also possible. What we see basically that across all countries, that if you have a 5-star rating, you are more able to command a higher price, a higher ADR, right? You can see this in the US. It's very clear. I could see in France as well, Spain, UK, Italy. It's not surprising, but think about this as well. So it means that sometimes if I'm getting, if I'm 4.7, I may have to make up with prices to get to be more attractive, right? So may have to touch my price because the review score is not enough, right? That's an issue. So something else we did this year, because we say, how about we help with this? We actually did a huge study on more than 10,000 Airbnb listings in the world. So several markets in the US, in Dubai, in Europe. And we looked at this. It was very interesting as if you look at them, 70%. So we basically, it was a whole data science thing, but for us, we try to determine what is money-making content. If I really summarize this, right? What is it in the listing that will get that listing to get more bookings, more revenue on average than the rest of the market, right? When we look at this by looking, because we're PriceLabs, we have the data, so we know which listings make more money. So by construction, you could see, okay, what do they have in common, right? So we could see in a way that the ones that are getting more revenue than the other listings competing, 70, they do a great job. And by definition, you could also see the ones that not are missing opportunities. Like in 70% of the listings, for example, have weak of unclear photos, meaning here they don't have the photos that we know or the level we know that can make them outperform the market, get more bookings, more revenue. 40% of them have incomplete descriptions. 40% again have inconsistencies. What I mean by inconsistencies is that, for example, in the description, in the photos, they may be, you clearly see it's a chalet in the mountains. And for some reason, someone somewhere ticked a box in Airbnb and added the fact that it was, it was oceanfront. It seems ridiculous, but we know it happens. We have hundreds of listings. So maybe somebody somewhere may make a mistake. And this kind of inconsistencies actually are the kind of ones that result in lack of trust by guest traveling, booking. So we see a lot of this. So we did this study and basically would see that only 12% of the listings really have this money-making content in their listings, the title, descriptions, in the reviews, in the photos, in the list of amenities. That's the big things we analyzed. And from there, we basically were able to then come up with a new tool that's called Listing Optimizer. So what's the idea of Listing Optimizer? So it's a tool that we've released in early December. That's going to do a few things, right? It's able to take your listings on Airbnb. You can choose to have like 10, 20, or your whole portfolio, if you will. And we're going to analyze that. As I said, it's not like, sometimes you can use ChatGPT and just say, ChatGPT, improve my title, my description. But based on what? Do you want to make it more romantic? You want to sound it more, a better style? On what base should you improve your listing title and stuff? So what we're doing here again, because now we have the data, we kind of know what is money-making content. We're really able to scan your listing, for example, and look at the title, descriptions, photos, tell you why there are issues, and through AI also give you a new version of that title, of that description that better resonates with the market. Because, for example, not only there may be a mistake, but maybe imagine it's an apartment in a city center. Maybe we know that from data that putting the title free parking can unlock more bookings, more revenue, because we know that's what's getting more bookings on average in the market. So really also able basically to improve a listing description and title by pointing out what gets more booking on average and enable you to approve a market. Same thing, you analyze your photos to show you as well, maybe the ones that are dark, or we also give you like advice on reordering the photos so that you can really show something that makes sense. Again, it seems it's interesting because I did workshops in France with large property managers, and I was a bit embarrassed to say, oh, we do this, and some were willing to give me their Airbnb listing, and we did this live, and it's true. We all talked about this that sometimes your photos, or some photos are not good because maybe you acquired a smaller company and they were not shooting good photos. The owners don't want to pay for a new series of photos. That's another issue. So what was also very interesting talking to property managers, they're like, oh, that's great because now you scan my whole portfolio, you tell me which listing I should fix first. So for people who say they are hard pressed with time, good news with that, we can tell you which listing you should look at first. And on top of this, some property managers telling me, well, I now can go to an owner and say, it's not just me saying this. Clearly, you can see we need to pay for new photos because that's really hurting your revenue. So I think it's interesting. And we won as well an award at a big conference, the DARM Data and Revenue Management Conference in the US. And you were there, Richie. Maybe you can share a bit how it was because we won a pitching Listing Optimizer to large property managers. So how was it received? And again, I think you're excited by Listing Optimizers. I'm curious to hear you talk about
I
it.
am super, super excited about this, right? This product came out of a hackathon from one of our team members. Every year we do a hackathon where we're working on what new things can we work on and problem statements that we're hearing from property managers and owners around the world. And this came from that. But also this is one that I personally experienced and would like to share that side of the story as well first. We talked about Paris Olympics. Last year, I was in Paris to watch Olympics, and the certain section of Paris where we wanted to stay in. This was a particularly hot summer, and I think probably everyone remembers from news that the occupancies were very low in the market in Paris, right? But this was a hot summer, and it's not common for homes in Paris to have air conditioning built in, at least the area that we wanted to live in, the old Paris neighborhood, right? I forget what was called ARR3, I want to say, or something like that. Right? And they didn't have AC built into the unit. So a bunch of property managers would bring in portable AC unit, and they'd bring in this portable use AC unit. They'd either update their description, maybe add a photo or something like that, right? And the first thing I, as a guest did is I filtered for amenities as an air conditioning unit. And in an area where all news outlet were saying that there's an oversupply, I knew that there were 1,000+ homes. I got 6 homes that had air conditioning unit in their amenities, right? That was not true. I knew that was not true, right? But neither did I have the time to flip through various other properties to saying who actually has air conditioning, right? In their description or somewhere else, right? Because sometimes it's not uncommon, and I'm sure many on this call will relate. We we end up updating description, or we end up adding photo, or we end up adding maybe amenity, and just because we are not like we're all busy, right? Sometimes we just don't update. Sometimes we may forget. Sometimes we don't even realize that we had to, right? And something as simple as that. We just ended up with my wife and I ended up with 6 homes that we could pick from. I'm sure there were several more, but didn't have the time to flip through and find amongst the 1,000 which ones have air conditioning. And so that's kind of what Listing Optimizer ends up doing, right? At least trying to drive consistency across what you're trying to do. And then coming back to Thibault, what you were saying, I was not at Dom, but I did hear fantastic news about our reception at Dom, and we won the Judges Award at Dom, and we rolled out Listing Optimizer earlier this month on December 1st or 2nd, I want to say, for general availability, and we're working through various partners. I see Mike. I don't know how to say your last name, Mike, but I see your message here. We're working through, and in the next couple of days or weeks, everyone will have general availability through through your partners that you're working with.
Yeah, and thanks for that. And indeed, so I think what was very interesting to us, again, it's also so if you work at PriceLabs, you have to know something. Richie is adamant that everybody should in a company, from Richie to me to anybody else, everybody should answer ticket support. Support that maybe you have some issues, it may happen, right? You send us a ticket, and so everybody in the company should be able to do that. And also, what's interesting as well is that sometimes when you look at the tickets, you can see the settings of somebody who's a PriceLabs customer. You can see things are right. You're doing the right thing. The price is set up right, base price, minimum stays, and you're like, well, let me know. So let me a minute. So from the interface, you can go and see some Airbnb listings. And sometimes you see the issue is the Airbnb listings. And sometimes what we hear as well from revenue managers is that, well, I get blamed in a way. Well, people tell me it's revenue management. I'm like, no, it's the listing, right? So in a way, so it's not a blame game, but in a way, it's a way to also have some clarity on some issues. Is the issue with the price or some policies, or is it the listing? And that really also helps. Again, as you're going into 2026, a diagnostic like this also lets you have a clear idea or where some issues are this. And again, it's to me it was really really interesting to have to sit at the table with property managers and looking at discussing this together and seeing how making, because it's kind of hard to say, yeah, my description is not the best, I need to rewrite it, but what do you put forward description? Is it the pool? Is it the Wi-Fi? Is it the Wi-Fi was like 10 years ago, AC in Paris in the summer maybe? Or is it free parking? So again, having kind of like price tag, being able to look at your own market, your own listing, and from there look at what is as the biggest probability to make you outperform the market, get you more bookings than your competitor is important. And again, it's also important because the tool also lets you see for each listing the main competitors, how they're doing. Also lets you track the ranking. So if you improve, you see where you're going. So anyway, so I hope it's clear. You get how excited we are with a listing optimizer. But to hear, it was just for me to conclude on like, yeah, quality is very important. We've just seen it's kind of hard for property managers large to do this, but sometimes maybe everything's going right, just some things in listings, because the photos are older, there's some inconsistencies in the listings. That's what's really really hurting. Maybe it's because at scale it's just harder to review everything, right? So again, having this tool that at scale can analyze everything, to me that's also an answer to this whole quality, right? So it's not just like the job is not as well done. Maybe sometimes there's so much things to look after at the same time that having us try to bring clarity on this factor that's impacting revenues we saw on the data, that's kind of important. Right, that's my cue to move to something else. So let us know, by the way, I just talked about listing optimizer. You can see in the pool, maybe there's another. We talk about portfolio analytics, we talk about neighborhood data, for example. Probably could be talking about market dashboard if you need more data about this. I talk about report builder. We get these great reports. If you need a follow-up on anything, whether you're current customer or not, let us know. So we'll make sure to get back to you and understand this. So as a conclusion, before we open the floor to more questions, obviously we saw this. You can't carry over your settings. Again, as your setup, really that's not what you're doing. But again, we saw with the example of booking windows, things are changing. So it's something you want to do with your team, or as dialogue you have with the owners. You use that data, for example, to show to the owners, hey, the market is changing. 7 days, Saturday, that's not going to cut it anymore in some markets, right? Benchmarking against peers, that's what Richie was saying. It's important to, and I know there was only one choice in the survey. Somebody said that, yes, there's only one choice. And somebody said, yes, we do both. Yes, we got this. Right? So indeed, right. Same time last year, these kind of things against yourself is important, against the market as well, against your peers. So really defining the right competitive set, comp set is very important, right? Tools like PriceLabs enable you to do this. Don't stop at the first definition you see by default in a tool. Make sure to refine this. What are the market definitions or views that you want to build that will enable you to refine, to see your performance? It's really, really important. You really think of like, oh, maybe I can tweak this in differently. And for example, having a comp set really geared towards compare myself with only the top quality listings, the ones who got at least 4.8 on Airbnb could be interesting, could also unlock some insights again, if quality is important, because that's my third topic here. We could really, really see the link this year at PriceLab, doing this whole data analysis, the impact of the quality of the listings, also the review score on the content in the end, right? Review score is kind of expected. People have been talking about this for years, but again, we got the data. But here, the quality of the listings was very interesting. How we can help you improve this at scale using AI, not random AI, but AI backed up by data and what we know can make you outperform the market. That's what we're trying to do. I think I'm closing here and opening to questions or other remarks, Richie, if you already have a topic on your mind.
No, I mean, I think this is something that I've said for 11 years every year, but as you get into the new year, and probably now or early in the new year is a good time to revisit your setup, revisit some assumptions that you've had about your setup or about your business, right? And evaluate if those still hold true for the next year or 2026 in this case, right? And just take a fresh approach, right? Relook at the data, rethink about how you want to manage and adjust your settings, because things change where the macroeconomic set changes. We're seeing shortened booking windows that changes, and you want to just take a fresh look, whether at the end of the year or at the start of the year.
Three questions in the Q&A, so do feel free to leave more questions, but we'll cover the first one. So I will read a question bravely and let you answer, Richie. The first one was around booking windows. Since demand is shifting to the last minute bookings, will pricing algorithms, like PriceLabs probably, start to reflect that? Instead of having
Yeah.
cheaper last minute discounts, will prices begin to rise to adapt to trends, for example? Ask Carrie.
Yeah. So PriceLabs has a setting called last minute discounts, right? It's a customization. And within this customization, for the when we had launched PriceLabs, we had a heuristic setting, which was like based on our general understanding, we discount rates X days before a book like last or today, right? X dates before today, right? Having said that, over the last, I want to say 2 years ago, we did this big breakthrough release where we changed how data structures worked, how our algorithm works, and everything else. And what we introduced in that last minute customization was a market based discount, right? And so if your last minute customization is set to market based, or if you've not touched it, then yes, we automatically adjust to how booking windows are shifting, right? Having said that, if you have changed that to saying I want 15% off in the last 15 days, now then you've taken control of it, and so you may want to take a fresh look at it. So yeah, so if that last minute customization is set to market based, I think it says market based or something like that. And so yeah, if it's set to that, then we adjust it. But if you've taken control of the algorithm and adjusted the last minute setting, then you may want to review it, especially if your market is seeing shortened booking windows.
Thanks. Next question is around quality and review score, basically, and pricing. Does PriceLabs have any way to adjust prices based on average review score, ideally shifting as review quality changes over time?
Yeah. So, two things, right? Again, sorry, I'm dating myself. When we had first started Price Labs, and we cut the data on review scores, the very like I want to say in 2014 or 2013, I remember I was working on and cutting the data. Those are like almost everyone was 4.7 and up, and very few people under 4.7. And so it didn't have a stark difference on how you wanted to price. But earlier this call, Thibault had this chart which had review scores and how your ADRs changed, right? And so what we have noticed over the last couple of years is that it does have an impact. And what we are doing is on our base price help. So in the base price help, how we calculate that market-based base price will have an impact on your review count and your review, what do you call it, score, I suppose, rating, review, your review count and review rating, and how does that compare to the market around you? And so that would have an impact on what base price we recommend to you. Now we're rolling this out as test in various for various customers, and seeing how the performance is, and also simulating performance inside. And then over the next couple of weeks, we'll have it available across. But if you're interested to look at it, feel free to shoot us an email, and we'd be happy to give you a beta access.
All right. So we have one or two more minutes. Does PriceLabs take into account seasons? I believe it does, but I'm debating it with another PL user. This one I can take. Yes, we took into, of course, seasons, if you will. So in the sense that in two ways, we did for each listing in the world, we're gonna create a pricing model that will detect in your hyper local market. It will see what's the seasonality in your market, right? What's high season, low season? Is it more weekend, weekdays? So all this we have. And so we have all these patterns. On top of this, if you want to, you can even have some kind of seasonality settings to take into account things such as I want this, and on top of this, in what we could call, Christmas season, for example, it's going to be 10 days, and I'm going to do specific things for the minimum stay or pricing. So we take into account in the way we calculate, and also we allow you to even shape a bit the pricing minimum stay to reflect season. That's how we call it for the holiday season. Next question here. Do you know, in UK specifically, London, do you know who's losing, gaining market share, booking Airbnb, Vrbo? We had some data around this. We not specifically London. So yeah, for this one, I don't have the data right here for London. But yeah. Last question. How does PriceLabs see average occupancy of our region, outer banks, islands? Is it capable of seeing occupancy of the hotels? Oh, hotels, that's a good one. Or does it see the listings on OTA for reference? How accurate is it? And for how before can you see this? So let's talk about this a bit. Hotels. Do we do hotels? Do we have hotel data?
Yeah, so I can answer this. When we're looking at occupancy of the region, we're primarily looking at vacation rental properties in that market. When we and In terms of accuracy and how far back, right? We've been over the last 10 years across various markets and different time periods. When we started, we've been collecting data around the world on occupancies. I want to say pretty much starting 2020, early 2020, we just started collecting data all around the world. So in Outer Banks, for all vacation rentals, we have a very good estimate of what occupancies look like. And this is stitched together. Every day, we know, we go in and see if the property is available or not available for the next 365 days. And then we stitch the data together. We get like almost monthly 150 terabytes of data that we process down, figure out, collate, and come up with something. And so that's kind of how we understand what the average occupancy is. For the hotels, we don't get occupancy. We do look at what the market rates are for hotels, and then you can choose in PriceLabs what do you want to affect your pricing. Is it just short-term rentals, or is it short-term rentals plus hotels, or is it just hotels? And based on that, you can adjust how your prices change. when you come into Price Labs, and if you select, you primarily have vacation rental properties, your prices are impacted by vacation rentals. If you say you're primarily hotels, your prices are impacted by mostly hotels, but you can tweak that if you wanted to.
I know over time. Do you still have time for last two questions, Richie?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let's do that. So let's go back to Listing Optimizer. There was a question from Lynn around what data sets would photos in title be compared to? These are it's probably an answer for photos on one hand, titles on
Yeah,
the other. Can you set the radius, or is it standard, or is that determined by AI?
yeah. So what we have done is again, like, we've been collecting data for what properties perform on OTAs, what generate revenue, what do not generate revenue, what generate occupancy, what do not generate occupancy. And then over a period of time, we stitched that together and said what titles actually have correlation, or not exact titles, but what characteristics or what attributes in titles have some correlation, what type of photos have some correlation, right? And through that, we built a set of heuristics which allow us to say, compare your property and say how are you doing relative to the set of heuristics that we have, right? And the second thing that we allow you to do is we also then benchmark your competition set, some properties around you. I think today we do 3 or 4 around you. And we say how are they ranking on the same heuristic set, right? And you may not be the best property overall, right? But as long as you're good relative to your competition set, I think you're golden, right? So that's kind of what we're doing. And then in terms of what does it when you see that comparison set, that's determined today by a standard that we're looking at. Um, Overall, like when we're trying to understand the heuristics, we're looking at global, and now we're going hyper local on that. When it comes to when we show your competition set today, that's we show you 3 or 4, and we're figuring out how to expand it, and what's the best way to expand it.
Cool. Thanks. Last question from Alex Nig. Hey, Alex. Hello. Long time no see. So basically, Alex is going back to the debate we kind of had around what makes revenue managers have lower scores. Uh,
Yeah.
if you have more, sort of the more party you have, the lower the score on average you have. What's the best? What's your guess on the main drivers? Is it just difficult to manage large properties, or I actually just leaving less money on the table with stricter policies, higher prices, um, charging more services, or things like this.
Yeah.
Everything in between. What do you think?
Everything in between. It's good to see if this is Alex, the Alex that I know. Alex, good to see you. I also see some other familiar names in the attendee list here. But Alex, one thing that I've heard from I want to say it was either Booking.com or Marriott. I forget which one. But their understanding was that property managers show up as photos, and there is no human behind it, versus in hosts there is a human behind it, and that tends to drive the behavior of how someone rates. It's much easier to rate a company more realistically and on a 1 to 5 scale versus a human. Sometimes we end up rating on a 4 to 5 scale. Also, when you're dealing with a host, maybe they're not just a photo and a name. They're also maybe more human in how they interact with you, versus large companies may not. Maybe a lot more process and SOP. So maybe it's that. And then sometimes it is expectation, right? PMs may be leaving less money on the table, and so it's your ratings are always relative. I have a certain set of expectation, and if someone delivers on that expectation, you're rating okay, but someone exceeds expectation, then you're rating higher, right? And the more you pay, the expectations are higher. So maybe
Yeah,
it's that.
and on this exactly right. On the other hand, I mean, one of the rate component of the rating is the value for money in a way, or the price. Uh, and I always heard that, if you have 5 out of 5 on how the money, your price, maybe not pricing enough, right? So sometimes I've heard this that, you probably don't want to be always like, oh, that was cheap. I'm kidding a bit, but indeed, I think that's going your way, Alex. You said leaving less money on the table also means like, if you're pricing a bit right, of course, you won't be always the cheapest thing compared with the value, right? Because hopefully that's not what you want to deliver to your owner either. So yeah, so that could be it. So again, I hope it's been useful. Richie, again, we're closing 2025. What can you I know wish or want to say to people listening on the oncoming 2026?
Um, Congratulations on ending or getting near to end of a fantastic year. I hope all of you had a fantastic year. And we're primed for another interesting 2026. I think macroeconomic uncertainty continues to be high in 2026, right? We're still living in the world of AI and uncertain whether there's an every day read a news article that says we are in AI bubble, and then the article right next to it says we are not in AI bubble, right? And so we're living in a little bit of macro uncertainty, and we deal with real world here, right? We deal with guests, we deal with properties, and we deal with real world. So as you're in that uncertain time, I hope you get to take some time off during the end of the year. I know it's busy season, but I hope you get to take some time off at the end of the year. I hope you get to recuperate. And then as you have time, and I know it's not the most fanciest of things, but please do dive into some data, look at that data and see how you'd want to plan for your 2026. That's what I'd leave you with. But happy holidays, everyone. Thank you so much. Over to you, Thibault.
Yeah, wise word. I agree. We just, obviously some of our pricing and price is powered by AI. We just talked about which is powered by AI. But in the end of the day, in the industry, AI has no arms. And when it comes to cleaning the properties, which is probably a bit of good, you still have your team. So we realize at PriceLab, exactly as Richie said, we know how operational our business, our industry is, right? This is really, really on our mind. So any way we can save you time is really important to us. Same thing for me. So thank you for more than 80 people who stayed 10 minutes over time. I hope you got value out of this. Thank you all. You get this recorded. You get a recording with this. It will be posted on the two podcasts, RevLabs for PriceLabs, RSU by PriceLabs as well. So if you see this recording, you've been to the end, kudos to you as well, because that's fantastic. We thank you as well. So thank you again for everybody who organized this, the data team at PriceLabs, as well as the RSU team and product marketing team. Thank you all, and wish you all the best. Take care, everyone. See
Happy
you next
holidays,
week.
everyone. Take care. Bye bye.